From the Gray Man Briefing, this is a summary of recent developments regarding the Second Amendment, cybersecurity, protests, supply chain disruptions, national security, law and order, free speech, censorship, government oversight, and more. Now, the latest from GraymanBriefing.com. Here's this week's Sword, read out by Super Essie.
This week, China moved to restrict exports of rare earth minerals critical to U.S. defense manufacturing. Nationwide protests intensified over racial divides in a Texas murder. Legal action escalated in response to transgender athlete policies and LGBT curriculum debates. The DOJ dropped a braced pistol case following Supreme Court guidance. Shipping firm DHL suspended certain U.S. deliveries as new custom rules disrupted the supply chain. Additional scrutiny mounted over pro-Palestinian groups with alleged CCP ties, and other major developments that shaped the national landscape. Let's begin today with civil unrest. In Frisco, Texas, two opposing protests were set for April 19th in response to the fatal stabbing of Alston Metcalf, a white male, who was stabbed allegedly by Carmelo Anthony, a black male. Surveillance videos and witnesses reportedly show Anthony stabbing Metcalf, yet activists are split. A pro-Metcalf rally originally scheduled at a school parking lot shifted to the stadium there to demand Anthony's rearrest after his bond was reduced and supporters raised $500,000 for his release. The flyers read, "Stop Black Violence on White Americans." This group, Protect White Americans, is associated with a former January 6 riot prisoner. Meanwhile, a counter-rally at the same location called for dropping charges against Anthony, asserting self-defense, and instead charging Alston's twin brother, Hunter, who was present at the time. The flyers read, "Solidarity for our young black child." The case has become racially polarized, with one side ignoring evidence and incidences of both sides aligning along racial and ideological lines. Viral support and donations are influencing the outcomes, and the incident has drawn national attention and echoes divides seen in earlier flashpoints such as George Floyd. Moving on, Senator Chuck Grassley, the chairman for the Senate Judiciary Committee, sent a letter to the DOJ and FBI urging them to assess whether the People's Forum and Code Pink should register under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, or FARA, due to alleged ties to the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP. Grassley cited concerns that both groups may be advancing foreign political interests without proper disclosure, referencing their financial ties to Neville Singham, a businessman reportedly linked to CCP-aligned media efforts. Code Pink and the People's Forum denied the allegations, framing them as politically motivated attacks on dissent and free speech. Grassley's inquiry is part of a broader Republican effort to scrutinize foreign influence by U.S. extremist organizations. Code Pink, which is an anti-government, far-left, anti-war, feminist, LGBT, pro-choice, pro-Palestinian group, and the People's Forum, which is a socialist, Marxist, anti-capitalist, and pro-Palestinian group, both share a top donor and or founder that the New York Times linked to the CCP, saying they are operated by, quote, the Chinese government media machine. The two extremist groups have used these allegations as a means to rally more protest against U.S. government entities. Moving now into legal, judicial, education, and government oversight. The U.S. Supreme Court agreed to hear a case seeking parental rights to opt their children out of school lessons involving LGBT content. Parents argue that they should be notified and allowed to withhold their children from sexually themed content. Opponents say this could disrupt inclusive education. The case, originating in Maryland, has national implications, and arguments began on April 22nd. Next, the Texas House passed a $1 billion school voucher bill along party lines. The legislation offers up to $10,000 per child for private school tuition, $2,000 for homeschooling, and up to $30,000 for special education students. Funds can cover tuition, meals, and transportation. The governor there in the state is expected to sign it into law before the 25-26 school year. Next, the Department of Justice filed a lawsuit against the state of Maine for refusing to enforce Trump's executive order banning biological males from competing in girls' and women's sports. The state's governor defended the policy allowing transgender athletes to participate based on gender identity. A federal judge has temporarily blocked efforts to cut school funding, and similar disputes are emerging in California and Minnesota. And New York Attorney General Letitia James was referred to the DOJ for potential prosecution over mortgage fraud allegations. The referral alleges that James misrepresented her residence and marital status to obtain benefits. The complaint was submitted by the FHFA and is now under the DOJ's review. James has led multiple legal efforts against Trump, including the civil fraud case. Now moving into the Second Amendment brief, which, by the way, if you guys are at all interested in keeping track of legal updates related to the Second Amendment, head over to graymanbriefing.com and join, because this is a focal point of what they do. They cover news, both national Second Amendment legal updates, but also down to the state and local levels. This week, we're looking at one in Washington, D.C. The DOJ dropped its case against Taylor Taranto, who was charged with possessing an unregistered short-barreled rifle due to a braced pistol. The CZ Scorpion in question had a lawful pistol brace, but was previously classified as an SBR under ATF rules. Following a Supreme Court ruling overturning that classification, and per direction from the Trump administration, the DOJ dismissed the charge. The case has been a key argument for the Biden-era ATF policy. Now moving into the supply chain and economy. As of April 21st, DHL suspended international business-to-consumer shipments into the U.S. with declared values of $800 or more. The action comes after U.S. Customs lowered the threshold for formal entry processing, creating documentation delays. Business-to-business shipments will continue, though slower. The change precedes the May 2nd expiration of an exception which would add more duties to lower value imports. Next, China imposed export license restrictions on 7 rare earth minerals essential to U.S. defense systems such as the F-35s and Tomahawk missiles. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency warned this move could give China long-term leverage over U.S. manufacturing. In response, the Trump administration announced up to 245% in tariffs on Chinese imports, including 125% base, 20% fentanyl-related penalty, and an additional Section 301 tariff. And the Trump administration, is weighing significant tariffs on pharmaceutical imports, citing national security and supply chain concerns. Over 90% of U.S. prescriptions are generic, and many are sourced overseas. Analysts warn of likely shortages and price hikes if tariffs move forward. The Commerce Department is expected to issue a formal recommendation by May 8th. And looking at a current event, the TSA issued a reminder ahead of the May 7th deadline for the Real ID compliance. Passengers using a non-compliant state ID must present alternative documents or face delays or possible denial of entry at security checkpoints. Real ID is not a national ID, but sets federal standards for state issuing licenses. Each state controls access to their records. That is all for this week. Thanks for listening. As always, remain aware, be vigilant, and stay safe.
Get unredacted, real-time briefings sent via email and through the Telegram and Signal apps by joining the Gray Man Briefing.